Our first question is a fax question, comes from Ecuador, from Universidad de Espiritu Santo. And this is the question: what tool do you recommend for mapping risk?
Wonderful question, and there are several ways to map risk. Some people break mapping risk down to, as simple as a 2x2 table, where you look at one axis on a high-low basis as being how frequently a hazard may exist or a risk may exist, and the other being how much money or time and effort has to be expended. And of course, in mapping on a 2x2 table, if you get an X in the high box, then you know you have to spend time on that issue. Progressing to something a little more complex is to use what we might say in the enterprise risk world, where you look at all facets of your operations to develop a schema where you're looking at categories of risk, and then you're looking at the economic impact if a risk were to manifest. And one of the things that's common in the risk management world is to break risk down into personnel risk, economic or financial risk to an organization, risks that emanate from the community environment, and perhaps those which are truly operationally driven, and then looking at them from an economic perspective. And you can plot these risks. And when you look at how frequently a particular risk may occur, such as fires or workplace violence, and then you compare that to the economic impact or personal impact, then you begin to be able to plot on a map which ones you have to respond to first.
Great. Thank you. Our next question is from Aguascalientes in Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Buenos días. Good morning. This is Marco Aurelio Hernandez, and we are here in the Colegio Marista of Aguascalientes. And I would like to ask a question regarding a service company where all the employees work in different automotive plants, and where the clients are basically all over the world in different countries. And how would you recommend to implement a strategy, a preventative strategy in terms of risks when you're dealing with such a diversity?
We have to, in a diverse organization or disparate organization where you have people working in many different places, we have to boil down our risk management technique to one or two critical facets. And if we go back to what I said in the first module, I think I focused a little bit on the fact that we have to control hazards. And there's a reason for controlling hazards, and of course it has something to do with the Churchill paradox as well. If we can control hazards, regardless of where we are and what we're doing, we'll achieve positive outcomes. So if I had limited dollars and limited time, and I could do one thing, I would go out and I would fix the hazards. I would reduce the hazards that people are exposed to. And then the injuries and illnesses are less likely to happen. And that way I don't have to worry about whether or not so much my training programs are effective. I'm not saying don't do training programs. I love them. I do a lot of them. You have to have them. But if we can control the reason why people get hurt or become ill, we will be winners. And that methodology will work regardless of where we are in the universe.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Pachuca, Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Currently, stress is one of the 21st century illnesses. How can an organization manage this in terms of human resource?
Stress is critical, and stress comes from many places, not just work, but of course we import stress from our community and our families into the work environment. And if organizations, and if we're talking about stress at work, and let's focus on that for a moment, if organizations will look at sort of a systems and a comprehensive dynamic of helping their workforces manage stress, several things come to pass. It's involvement. It's important to involve workers in the operations of the day so they understand where the organization is going and what the requirements of the job are. It's important to provide workers or employees with a path of care. If they're bringing in issues from the outside, the community or home, if an organization can provide a path for whether it's health care, psychological assistance, an employee assistance program, there are many ways that organizations can help. I think the biggest issue here when we talk about the health of a workforce, involvement, caring, getting folks involved in the day-to-day activities and making them part of the process is paramount, and it's tantamount to success.
Thank you. Next question is from Puebla, Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I'm calling from the Tecnológico Zacatlán. My question is the following. Most of the illnesses are caused by smog, for example, and bad nutrition. So how can we mitigate or eradicate these problems when man himself is causing these problems onto himself?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a big question. It's bigger than we can address in this module. But let's break it down to its smallest components. If we're worried about things such as environmental impairment, such as smog, we have to engage our workforce, our organizations, and the community and the governments in a cohesive strategy to fix those issues. Smog, whether it's mass transportation, whether it's carpooling, whether it is looking at maintaining health care and assisting folks in doing the right thing at home, and you brought up nutrition as well. This is obviously in certain parts of the world critical, and whether there are programs where we can assist people with their nutritional needs or provide the education and training at work that they can take back home, these are a couple of different approaches. The smog issue is a very big one, and in different parts of the world it would be very complex to solve. But the bottom line is that there has to be, in my estimation, if that's the risk we're attacking, a way to engage the workforce, the community, and the employers or the government, if you will, in a cohesive strategy to attack that.
Great, thank you. Our next question also is faxed in from Cuba, and it states, you mentioned ACES, Security Risk Assessment. I always thought it might be better to create our own assessment, so why should we look to one from an association to assist us with determining security risks?
Good, great question. I agree with you that the organizations should create their own assessments for the particular reason that they must relate to that organization's activities. The ACES risk assessment, if you will, the security risk assessment, provides a good model. It's a great starting place. It provides a floor, if you will, and gives some critical thinking. For example, categories of risk, categories of security activities that we might want to look at. So if for no other reason than to begin the process, the ACES assessment and others provide a wonderful model and a starting place.
Thank you. We go back to Mexico for our next question. Go ahead, please.
My question, in order to manage constant changes within an organization in an efficient way, how can we promote this supervision process that you were mentioning with specific tactics involved? How can we implement this? Thank you very much.
Involvement, recognition of everybody's role. And by involvement, I mean that we have to include all elements of the organization so that everybody's on the same page. I think if we get folks involved, not only the supervisors, but the workers that are reporting to them, involved in the analysis of risk and hazards, our outcomes will be much more robust.
Thank you, and let's now move again to your important messages on the topic of this program.